Is this thing working? I think it's working. Might be working. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic start to your week. So, topic of conversation. This is something that's come up quite a bit, and it's been a little bit more on the forefront of conversation. This is really keying off of a conversation I had with Dr. Differential. Question is, stroker kits, are they worth it? What do they gain you in power? Oh crap, hang on. We're gonna have to fix one thing real quick. Hang on, talk amongst yourselves. Time out, time out. Son of a bitch. Forgot a key component to this operation here. That is electricity. Because, you know, this stuff just doesn't run on good vibes, unfortunately. Hang on. Time out. All right. There we go. That'll keep us alive. Okay, so I had to get this thing on life support. So, stroker kits, are they worth it? What do you gain? What do you get? What is the whole deal with stroker kits, and why do so many guys always ask about them? You know, part of the conversation typically flows like this. When are they going to come out with a 426 Hemi for, you know, the Scat Pack or the 1320 or whatever? And it's funny because it's kind of a psychologically satisfying number, I guess. I mean, if you're old enough to even know what a 426 Hemi is, you know, a lot of people, they just kind of see it as an arbitrary number, you know, 426, 440, you know, what makes that better than a 420 or a, you know, 432 or whatever. Just pick a random number in between, right? Tell you what, it is hot, by the way. Freaking muggy. Had me some frozen purple Gatorade over here. Flavor tonight is purple. So here's the deal. The general consensus is bigger is better. More displacement is got to make more power. Obviously, everybody say it with me. No replacement for displacement. Yeah, okay, get it. Okay, done. It's out of the, okay. So in saying that, that's not necessarily always the case. It kind of depends on what you're doing with this engine. It won't do you a whole lot of good to have a really big, low revving, big engine if you're trying to go really fast. That kind of stuff plays out great for a tow truck or something like that, but doesn't play well to try to, you know, go really fast. And so in that case, the displacement could actually hurt you. But for purposes of conversation, what we're talking about basically is what are the power differences from a 392 to a 426, or what would be the performance difference between a 5.7 and a 6.4 stroker, that type of a deal. So let's kind of dive into this. So a lot of folks are asking about the whole 426 displacement. And again, that just harkens back to a displacement of the Gen 2 Hemi, you know, the legendary Gen 2 Hemi displacement. But that's really the only special thing about that number. It's just it's a psychologically satisfying number that people like to say or hear or whatever. It makes them feel good. What's funny is that you don't get the same resonance from 440, which you can actually take these engines out to. In fact, with a large enough bore, you can get them out to 454 cubic inches. Why didn't anybody go nuts over that? Is it because it's a GM displacement? Come on. Don't be racist. Anyway, you guys know the idea that I'm going with here. More displacement means more torque, but it doesn't necessarily mean more horsepower. So we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into this. Before I jump into it, let me check in with everybody that's in Michael Corleone is first in, saying, good evening, Professor. Got the arm flex. I like it. Marco's checking in. Silver Knight saying, hey, B. Eric saying, good evening, B. Mason. New to the channel and love the content. Thanks, man. Appreciate you hanging out with us, brother. Modern Red saying, sup, Professor B. What's up? Got the flex in. I like it. Big Dave saying, sup, B. Log in my stroker with a B cam. King, Lord, God, B cam. Say it right. Boom, come down from the mountaintop, King, Lord, God, B cam. If you're old enough to know that and you know what that reference is, you, my friend, are a legend. It goes back a long time. Big Dave saying autocorrect sucks. Absolutely. Jesus is in here saying here to learn. I like it. Modern Red saying what really thinking about stroking a the BGE block, which is the 6.2 and the 6.4 block to 426 and add in my D1X Pro Charger. Thoughts? We're going to get to that. It might be not exactly what you don't want to hear, actually. Mark saying, long time, no chat. Mason, what's up, Mark? Unfortunately, I got accused of reckless driving and my RT got impounded over the weekend. Not good. So I wasn't able to enjoy the extended weekend, but I got her back safe and sound. That's good. Big Dave's correcting with this B cam. Yes. For me, the 426 was more about making the internals bulletproof more than power gains. It's a good idea for that. Eric saying, great topic for me. I was thinking about a 426 with my current 224, 236 custom cam or a Pro Charger or both. You're going to need more cam than that. Dr. Diff is saying, what it be? Something tells me the topic is going to be spicy tonight. Done a little bit. Waiting on some specs for a stroker B cam. And yep, it's getting that Pro Charger, Pro Charge treatment. So, yeah, so here's the deal. By the way, yeah, I think you might be able to still find King Lord God B cam, but yeah, Cobra 427 was my old handle in one of the Mustang forums, and I was a big champion of that B cam. So here's the deal. First, we have to talk displacement per displacement, all things being equal. So we're going to dive into this. First, we're going to talk about stroker motors, A to B comparison. In other words, all things being equal, 392 with more displacement, the way that it sits with the cam that's in it. That may not necessarily be, well, it's not really a realistic comparison. Actually, it kind of is, because a lot of guys with cams in their 392s are now thinking about going with a stroker kit. So doesn't matter what we're talking about. Now we're just talking about displacement. So first things first, you're going to notice in any stroker combination that is more or less just a displacement increase, you are not going to pick up horsepower. That's really not how it works. You may pick up some horsepower at the very top, but it's going to be minuscule. It's not going to be like you're picking up horsepower. Not quite like that. What you'll notice is that you will have a pivot RPM number. And that pivot RPM number is, for street engines at least, in this type of a performance configuration where the control engine, in other words, a stock 392 or your cam 392, let's say it makes peak horsepower at 6,200 RPM. Your pivot number is going to be somewhere about 1,000 RPM less than that. So say 5,200 RPM, and that chart is going to rock on that number. It's literally going to be the fulcrum. Like if my middle of my face is that fulcrum, it's going to rock on that number at 5,200 RPM, which is to say that torque will come up, and in some cases, horsepower may actually fall off a little bit. It may make a little bit more peak horsepower, but you'll notice it falling off a bit more rapidly. So the quick-witted of you are going to go, well, yeah, but look at all the torque that you're picking up down low, and that's all awesome and everything. Well, sorta. It is if it's a street car and you're just going out playing around with the thing, you know, making street hits. You want something that's going to fry tires. That's about it. You're not really doing a lot of roll racing. You're not doing a whole lot of drag racing. It's more of a street combination that's entire purpose in life is to just be a fun car. And in that respect, it works out pretty well. But again, all things considered, intake manifold for intake manifold, camshaft for camshaft, all things being equal, that will, the torque curve, I don't know how this is looking at y'all's end. Anyway, torque curve comes up and the horsepower curve will actually fall off a little bit more quickly. Now then, how does it affect drivability? Well, you're going to have more tip-in torque, and this is really more the key area where the stroker motor shines. You're going to have more tip-in torque, throttle, partial throttle, tip-in torque. In other words, you're just tipping into the power and rich mode of the engine. Partial acceleration really livens up. So that's where they shine in terms of drivability. But really, that's the only thing that it does. It's not going to give you this brand new, overwhelming new sense of amazement with this engine. It's really not. And typically, the numbers will adjust by the percentage of larger displacement that you've come up with. In other words, let's say you go from a 300 cubic inch engine to a 360 cubic inch engine. 20% more torque. You may see 20% more torque down low with absolutely no horsepower gain whatsoever. And it's going to be kicked up in the back end. That's kind of the same idea. It's just, 392 to 426, man, you're maybe looking at 10%, right? So you're going to come up a little bit, again, camshaft for camshaft. You're going to have that initial torque hit, and the torque is going to be a little bit stronger. It's also going to numb the effects of the camshaft that's in it a little bit. It's going to make it act a little bit more mild because for any given RPM, you are bringing in more air at a higher velocity because it still has to take up the same space. So if you're getting more air into the engine, but you have a finite amount of space that it's going to be traveling through, in other words, intake runners and whatnot, then that air is going to be coming in much more quickly. It's going to have a much more efficient cylinder filling. But again, that will start to become a bit of a detriment because at some point, the runners just become less efficient to be able to manage that amount of air that's needed. Again, RPM for RPM at the higher RPM, again, camshaft for camshaft. So there's your stroker combination in a nutshell. That's what it's going to act like camshaft for camshaft. So what are we talking about when we're talking about stroker motors when you're kind of at the point where you just want to make more power with the thing? You're actually putting a stroker motor together to make more power overall. What do you need to do to prepare for this? Well, first of all, get a second job because this stuff ain't cheap. First of all, we're talking about a stroker kit just in general because we're going to start talking about pricing and costs and things like that. I'm talking about in generalities, okay? This isn't like a final cost analysis, but you need to be in the know when it comes to this to make sure that if you're thinking about going down this path, that you've prepared yourself for what's to come. So, for a quality stroker, oh, and by the way, word to the wise, if you decide to go cheap and try to save money in this, good luck, because I've seen plenty of perfectly good stroker motors let themselves go. So, first of all, do your research. Buy only the finest quality parts that you can find. There are distributors out there that will sell you really good parts. MMX is pretty good. I'm not a big fan of everybody over there. Some of those people aren't a fan of me, but I will say that the parts that they sell and that the brands that they sell with Molnar rods, Molnar crank, Mala pistons, the whole bit, good stuff. Diamond is another good piston provider. Clevite bearings, the whole bit, everything good to go. You're looking at $5,000 though, $5,000 for your stroker kit alone, just for the parts to make the displacement bigger. We're talking the right windage tray. We're talking the right rods, the right hardware, the right everything. Roughly $5,000. From that $5,000 mark, you've also got to factor in an assembly. Machine shop typically will be the ones that are putting that thing together. Sure, you can put them together in a shop, but you would probably want a machine shop to go over your block to make sure everything is just so before that stroker assembly goes into it. So, a bit of a cleanup on the deck surfaces, a dingleberry hone and a few other things, plus the assembly, you're looking at somewhere around $1,500. You are $6,500 into this thing, at least in terms of outside sourcing labor and parts. $6,500, and you haven't even done anything yet. So next is going to come labor, pulling the thing apart, putting everything together. You're looking at probably another at least $2,500. So we're at 65, 75, 85. Now you're at $9,000. Okay, $9,000 to put. Oh, don't forget the retune. It's going to cost you maybe $400, $500, whatever. Call it $9,500 just for the sake of argument. You're looking at somewhere around $9,500 for this to be done right. And this, by the way, is assuming that you already have a camshaft, long tube headers, intake manifold. You're probably going to want to have it looking at that intake manifold, obviously ported in with a throttle body, is assuming you already have that now. But if you don't, your 95 just turned into $11,000 because of long tubes. A cam kit, you're looking at 11, I don't know, call it $1,000, $12,000. If you didn't have the car tuned before, then now you do. Now you're talking 12 plus about $1,500, so $13,500. Intake and throttle body is going to cost you another at least $500. So now you're at, no, hell, more than that. You're looking at $5,000 for the intake plus $5,000 with $13,500. Call it $14,500. Okay, that's what it's going to be. Well, and then you got some more labor involved. Call it $15,000. We're just going to call it $15,000, and that's if you've got quality folks doing the work and really scrutinizing the install, getting it absolutely just right. So somewhere around $15,000. Arrington crate engines cost $18,000. So there's that to consider. Anyway, you can see where this is starting to get real expensive. And again, this is in that should you do it portion of the chat. If we know that you're going to have to budget somewhere around at least $15,000, could go a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower if you get a brother-in-law deal, but we're going to use $15,000 as our target number. What can you do with $15,000 to pick up a significant amount of power? Well, a supercharger would be the first place you would look, but a lot of guys don't want to go with a supercharger for a lot of obvious reasons. It's complicated. There's a lot, damn, was that a bug? Anyway, it can be a bit complicated. It's a messy install, not necessarily the route that you want to go in terms of the centrifugal superchargers and PD blowers, positive displacement, whether it's a Maggie or a any of the Roots, PD blowers, Whipple or E-Force. Which is kind of Maggie now, so full circle on that. But you get the idea. Either PD blower is a real clean install, but it's going to play havoc with your transmission. HP70 just isn't there to be able to deal with that large torque hit down low. So, but all of those solutions are technically going to make more horsepower than you would get from just that stroker kit alone. So what can you do for the stroker kit to actually make it make power? And why would it be better than supercharging if it's making less power? Well, number one, it's going to be easier on the transmission to deal with just in general. And number two, man, it's naturally aspirated, and a lot of guys just like the naturally aspirated route. So $15,000, you could go blower, or, and you know what's coming, you know this is about to come out of my mouth, right? Take your $15,000 plus your scat pack wheel your ass down to the dealership and get yourself a Hellcat, because you're only a few $1,000s away from the real difference in cost between your used Scat Pack and a used Hellcat. And the Hellcat comes with all of the parts that you need to make it go fast, and it's got a transmission that will deal with and put up with the abuse that you are lusting after when you put this, blower motor, stroker thing, or whatever it is together. Plus, it doesn't matter what you do up to a certain point. Now, there are exceptions to the rule here, guys, but man, we're talking about outliers. There ain't nothing you can do to a 392 to keep its shit from not getting pushed in by a freaking Hellcat. And that's just all there is to it. If you're out there trying to roll race, you put a stroker together, man, you are a big fish in an itty bitty teeny tiny pond. I am sorry to tell you this, but I have seen stroker guys go out and run 11.2, 11.0, 1090, and that's a fast-ass car. I've even seen them dip into the 1070s, which are outliers. Lots of weight reduction. And somebody with a dadgum Hellcat stock, I don't know if y'all could hear that. So somebody was piping up out in front of the shop. So here's the thing. If you guys are new to the channel, Studio Z05 is right down the street from Velocito. It is a pretty night, and there's a lot of folks heading out to make some hits. So if you hear that, it just means that Velocito is in business this evening. So anyway, yeah, go out there, spend all this money, have all this time, effort, energy, emotion invested into this stroker motor that means so much to them for whatever reason, and have some schmuck in a Hellcat on a drag pack get out there and drop a 1080 on their ass. I mean, it's like a stock car, bro. And the guy's sitting there, none the worse for wear. The guy didn't know any better. He says, yay, 1080, woo! And that's literally as easy as it comes. Whereas the guy with the stroker has got all this stuff invested, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day if you win the race or not, is all anybody cares about. And oh, it can hang with a stock Hellcat? Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't, it makes it special, but it makes it special to a much smaller crowd. Just know that that's coming your way. And it may not go as well as you hope, if you run up against somebody with just a little bit of understanding of how to get that Hellcat down the track. A lot of guys don't like hearing that. I don't like hearing it because I'm a big fan of the NA stuff. But it's a sign of the times for what we're truly dealing with. And when I'm talking about these types of stroker motors, I'm talking about street-based engines. I'm not talking about put a sniper intake on it, put a huge cam in on it, spin the thing to 7,500 RPM. Some of the Harley guys, I guess, are making hits. That's not who I'm talking to. I'm not talking about a race engine, which is what these things end up being. And by the way, you can spin these engines to 7,000 RPM all day long with a built short block and everything else. That's not really the problem. The problem is at what point is it no longer streetable? So anyway, barring the outliers, the street-based 426s, they're fun to drive. But if you want to know what a good street-based 426 drives like, just ask any Hellcat for the black key for their Hellcat. Hop in the car and take it for a whirl. It is exactly what a strong street-based 426 drives like. It's torquey down low, stronger than a 392, but not really that much more horsepower up top. It's a big rush down low, and then that's about it. I can't put it any differently to you than that. And I can't explain it to you any better. Something that you have to experience for yourself. Now then, what can you do to a stroker to actually get the thing to run good? And why can you get away with some things that you can't get away with a stock engine? Well, displacement is actually pretty cool. It allows you to do a couple of things when you're putting an engine together that you just simply can't do with a stock engine. First things first, displacement masks the cam a little bit. It numbs the severity or the radicalness of the cam. It takes that away. So what can you do? Well, you can put a more aggressive cam in that combination. And it can be significantly more aggressive because the more aggressive the camshaft, the less active your intake runners will be. The less active your intake runners will be, it's going to make it want to rev a little bit higher. It's going to build more mid-range power, even more so than if it were like that cam, obviously in the smaller displacement, but it's going to be easier to tune and it'll have good street manners, but still be able to, again, make significantly more power through the mid-range and upper mid-range. 426s, 440s, it doesn't matter. You can start getting away with cams that would make a 392 just run like a dog. You can start really getting a lot more aggressive with your low separation angle as well. You can drag that in, which is probably going to be what you're going to want to do, especially if you're widening out your duration. And all of this is an effort to work with, a stock intake manifold. I know I've said it before that I don't have a ton of experience with stroker motors with stock intake manifolds, but I got to tell you, it's a really good manifold, especially for a stroker, because you can still have all of your power down low. There are a lot of people going out tonight. You have a lot of power down low, and then at whichever prescribed RPM, flip the short runners open and be able to carry that power out a little bit. A cam is actually good for the intake manifold as far as allowing it to make more power, again, because the runners are less active. So in that respect, how much more power can you make, right? Well, you can actually make a damn sight decent amount of power, but again, you're looking to be somewhere in that, like, let's say, for example, you put, and I'm going to talk 248 dyno jet numbers here because everybody freaking quotes them. So let's talk the dyno jet 248, which is your inertia style dyno. Let's talk those numbers. Cam 392, everybody guns for that 500 horsepower to the rear wheels number. So let's talk that first. If you have a car and it makes 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, God, I hate talking dyno numbers. Ugh. Y'all know my ideas with dynos anyway. So you will probably make about 10% more power. You might, with the cam and the stroker and everything else, let's say it makes another 50 horsepower. Not too shabby. I'll give you another idea. It's not only going to make more, well, let me couch that statement. I've seen some stroker setups make a lot of power, but they were built specifically for high compression, lots of cam, and the cars were just not, I wouldn't say that they're not streetable, but man, they were not that fun to drive on the street. So taking that with a grain of salt, 10% more torque probably goes without saying. I don't know if I would give it 10% more horsepower, but I would say close. Maybe 9%. 8%, but it's not going to be this huge number. And again, you're going to start to end up being limited by intake manifolds and things like that. But the car will be a lot more responsive. It's going to be faster. It's going to run better in general. It will feel better to drive, but just don't expect the absolute world to show up, at your feet just because you have one of these combinations. Let me kind of walk you through another way to look at it. I know that one of Arrington's, I don't think they've changed their website. One of their stroker combinations, 426, maybe it's the 411. It's 426. That is quoted at 600 horsepower. Like it's a 600 horsepower engine. Well, that's obviously at the flywheel. Let's dissect that a little bit. All of y'all got your calculators out? Because at some point we got to do a little work here, okay? Here's what I want you to do. Remember we were talking about that 500 horsepower to the rear wheels thing, right? Well, that's on a DynoJet 248. If you take, and everybody wants to talk about their 15% loss at the rear wheels. It's a sleight of hand thing, but we'll go ahead and work with it. I need y'all to take 500 divided by 0.85, because remember, we have to use the margin to get to the gross margin of your rear wheel horsepower to get to your flywheel. You don't take 500 times 1.15. No, you divide by 0.85. It's a gross margin. Anybody want to figure out what that number is real quick? Let's see. I'll scroll down here and see if anybody pops that number up. It is, drum roll please, 588 horsepower. Thank you, Busademi. So let me get this straight. You're going to spend $18,000 for that crate motor, or you're going to spend, what did we agree to, 15 grand once it was all said and done for the kit, or at least, what was it, 9 grand for the stroker alone, for what is in essence 12 horsepower? I mean, if we're going to go by that math, right? 12 horsepower? Really? Like, the fuck? That doesn't even sound right. It doesn't seem like that would be right, does it? The math starts to not work right here. So let's say instead of 500, at what number would you have to come from for it to actually make sense? Well, I'm kind of baffled by this. What's 435 divided by 0.85? Let's see if Boosted can jump on this one real quick. Boosted, what's 435 divided by 0.85? Because I don't have my calculator out. I can't do it. I'm just curious. This is kind of a pivot number here. 435 divided by 0.85. Let's see what that number is. Because that's going to be pretty telling. 511 horsepower. Okay, so 511 versus, that would be a stock engine, by the way, on an inertia style dyno. So a stock engine on an inertia style dyno corrects to 511 horsepower, which makes sense because that's a standard correction, or what's also known as a racer correction. It corrects it to a different SAE standard. It's an old thing. So 511 horsepower, by the way, if you've ever wondered why people say, well, that engine's underrated, and that engine's underrated, it's because when you put it on a dyno, it's correcting to a different standard. Just know that coming into the conversation. Depending on, anyway, just that's what it is. So 511, and then with the cam and a few other things, it's going to bump it up to, what did we say it was? 588. So 588 horsepower. So we're picking up 77 horsepower with a cam and headers and a little bit of elbow grease and some other things. Not a bad gain. But now you're wanting it to go from that to 600, it's 12 horsepower. You see where I'm going with this? Like, you're not getting there from here. Now, granted, yes, you're picking up some torque, but it's not quite as simple as it sounds, is it? And once you start rolling those numbers back, you can kind of see where it makes it difficult for me to sign off on a stroker motor. And we haven't even talked about boosting the things and just the freaking headache that comes from boosting any of these Hemis with a cam, much less a stroker motor with a cam. In short, stroker motor, good idea if you have a car that's paid off, you just want something with a little bit more of a hot rod feel to it. You're gonna make more power. You know, you're gonna pick up over and above a cammed 392. Realistically, let's say you picked up another 30 horsepower and 30 pound-feet of torque. On a dyno, it's gonna look real impressive, but it's gonna be less than 10% of the total output of that engine. Just how it is. And it's gonna be tilted. So you may even make 40 more foot-pounds of torque somewhere in the curve, but you're just not gonna get this big wash of horsepower. And the horsepower, once it meets its peak, is gonna trail off a little bit more quickly. That is basically how it is. Now you can fix a lot of that with a camshaft, a little bit more duration, tighten up the LSA, try to bring that power in a little bit. It is gonna make it fall off a little bit harder, but that's why you tune for the transmission. But let me catch up with you guys real quick, and then we're gonna start talking about boosting because it's gonna get annoying here in just a minute. Let's see, I don't know where I stopped off. I think I stopped off with Big Dave and Eric here. Eric saying, great topic for him. He was thinking about a 426. Oh yeah, that's when I said you're gonna need more cam than that. You will. You're gonna need something at least 228, 230 to make that work. Yeah, Dr. Div. Yeah, you would have had to been around the Mustang forums back. Golly, this is going back so far, man. I don't know. If you do a Google search, King Lord God B-Cam, it'll pop up, I think, somewhere. Hey, Mike's checking in from Washington. Expecting 101 degrees tomorrow. Yuck. Oh, Dr. Diff is asking, let's throw in some of that intake talk with the stroker too. So we do need to talk about intakes, and we need to talk about it because this is where a lot of folks can kind of get a little bit confused. So the stock intake manifold is really good at making power down low, and it's pretty good at making power up top. When the short runner actuator clicks over, that actually does help to make power up top. The intakes like the Super Victor or the Victor, or whatever they're calling it now, is a big lump of aluminum that is basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's kind of a, it's like a 6-1 manifold that's been enhanced. It's not a bad intake manifold, but it's not as good as the stock manifold in terms of making power down low. It may make a little bit more power through the mid-range and upper mid-range, but I don't think it's going to carry up top near as well. At least I haven't seen one carry all of that great up top. And then there's the Sniper. The problem with the Sniper is that by the look of it, it seems like it's tailor-made for a stroker combination. The runner length isn't really too terrible, although, you know, I think the runner length is about that long, so say 8 inches, 6 or 8 inches on that Sniper, which is a fraction of the length of the stock manifold, obviously in long runner mode, and of the Victor, just in, it's obviously it's fixed because it's a lump of aluminum. That Sniper manifold is going to try to favor higher RPM. The problem with that, if you want to call it a problem, is that stretching out one of these Hemis to really do it right, you're going to want to stretch that thing out to about 7,400 RPM. And I don't think there's a lot of guys out there that are willing to do that. To get the most out of that intake is what I'm getting at. You're gonna need good amount of duration, lots of lift. It's gonna be a pretty radical cam for the street to get an intake like that to truly work right. And I don't know that I would want to tune one of those types of combinations. It gets a little bit racy, and you lose the drivability. You lose the tip-in throttle response. I'm not worried about wide open throttle, but just the transitional throttle. You know, you're cruising along 40 miles an hour, you tip into the throttle to just kind of roll up to 55 or 65 miles per hour. You lose that punch, you lose that wave of torque that the other manifolds are going to be able to give you because of the longer runner length. So for me, the limiting factor on the stock intake manifold is the throttle body, and there's just only so much you can take out of the throat of that stock intake manifold to work with flow. I mean, just, you know, with flow velocity and RPM and everything else. That's one of the reasons why you'll see that intake manifold kind of plateau on the stock cars. So what I would suggest is for a street manifold, stick with the stock one, you know, port it, have it port matched to an 85 millimeter throttle body. It's going to make decent power. 85 millimeter throttle body flows a lot. Even when you open everything up as much as you possibly can, there's still going to be some restrictions and some contorting and some things like that inside that throat. But it'll still flow. Once you cut the thing up enough, it'll still get about 800 CFM out of it, give or take. And that should be plenty for any of those stroker motors, even at those RPMs. Again, runners and everything else, though, at that point are going to be the restriction. So I don't think an 85 millimeter throttle body would be a big restriction at that point. The hell was that? I don't know if that translated to you guys. Sounded like a freaking old airplane was idle and taxiing down the back street over here. So that's the intake manifold trifecta, if you will. And see, that's the bigger problem here. We don't have FAST making intake manifolds for us. We don't have MSD making intake manifolds for us. We're stuck. We've really only got two manufacturers other than a custom one-off Hogan sheet metal intake manifold, which you ain't gonna buy, to go on these cars. And because of that, we're at a bit of a loss here. So feel free to give them a shot. Again, I've seen decent results with those intakes on stroker motors, but you just didn't see it just wasn't like a wow factor. And I'll be real honest with you, those engines in those cars, to drive them didn't feel any different than a 392 did down low, which is a little bit of a drag because, man, that's the whole reason why you're buying a stroker to begin with, is to get that hit of torque. So I just don't have one that I can recommend, at least not yet. And that's the other problem. You don't see anybody, at least I don't see anybody actively campaigning a 392, a built 392 with any of these intake manifolds. There has been absolutely no partnership. In fact, from what I can tell, it's just been, here's this intake out into the world, and you know, with no real partnership, no drag strip data or anything like that. I mean, how are you gonna say, yes, I like this manifold, yeah, I endorse this 100%, without any of that backup? And again, because we only have the two intake manifolds out there, there's been some folks that didn't have that great of a result on a 392 with that Victor intake. So, you know, much less the Sniper. We're just talking about the Victor here. You know, I've heard of people that have put that on their cars. It may have picked up power on the dyno, but it got slower at the drag strip because maybe the car wasn't tuned properly. They didn't drag the RPM shift points down. And it may have picked up some power somewhere, but it wasn't able to carry the power. And that's the reason why. So if you can't tell, there's just not enough data. And again, because we're not, as Mopar guys, we're not supported by the aftermarket the way that other manufacturers are. We just don't have the kaleidoscope of aftermarket suppliers to choose from. Sovereign saying, hey. Dr. Div saying, someone told me today a little slight modification, a high roller cam would make a good match on the 426. It would. Dr. Div saying, might I add, I know for a fact B Mason cams make massive amounts of torque, more of a torque plateau than a curve. That is correct. I try to put cams together, try to design cams that are going to make good overall average torque numbers. It's one of those things where, you start trying to get too aggressive with the cams and they start acting a fool, and it's just, I don't know. Even my big cam, even the high roller at wide open throttle on the hit makes more torque than factory at 2,500 RPM. So, that's just how that cam works. Owen saying, great topic as usual. Thank you, buddy. Dr. Div saying, get his second job. Yep. Eric said, I guess I'll start applying for my second job for my 392. No doubt about that. Complex saying, good evening, B. Good evening, Complex. Mike saying, would you say those Mopar stage kits are worth it? If you're talking about the scat kits, no, not really. And, the different, stage 1, stage 2, this, that, and everything else, those start to get a little bit convoluted. And to be honest with you, stage kits give you a kind of an idea, but they're not an end-all be-all. There's kind of a range, but there's not. What's a stage 1 to me might be a stage 2 to you, or a stage 3 might be a stage 2 to you. It's a little bit different way of looking at things there. So, I mean, it's worth it to take a look at them from that point of view, but I don't know, man. The reality is that you're going to get into that and you're going to go, well, what about a comp 270 versus a comp 274? Remember those conversations? Those are, kind of where the old stage numbers would wind up, and it's really not worth it. So you get into like the comp stage cams. Stage 2 is about as aggressive as I would get for the street if you want to have decent drivability and tunability and, fuel economy and all that good stuff. Much more than that, they get a little bit too racy and they sound cool. And it is cool. It's cool for a little bit, but some guys have more of a tolerance for that. Like me, I like a radical cam, but that's just me for something like the truck or something I'm just playing around with. But that doesn't always mean it's going to make more power. Him and Dad saying, hoping you would go live. What's up, Him and Dad? Big Dave saying, I love my 426, but B is always right. I spent enough on my 392 to have bought a Hellcat and still have an HP 70 and scat axles. Yeah. Dr. Div saying, for a long block swap, buy the book is 16 and a half hours per all data. So let me give you an example of what that means, guys. If you were to do flag hours and 16.6 hours times shop rate. Now, most shops will give you a break on the hours, but you're still looking at a significant chunk right there. All right. Again, is it worth it? Tough to say. Mono Red saying, in my opinion, stage kits are overpriced and you can do better with aftermarket. Yeah, it's true. It's just, it's a good barometer for some guys. As long as the stage is being set by a reputable distributor, then you can kind of bet that you know what you're getting into. Stage 1 is going to be a mild upgrade. You'll pick up some power, but it's not going to be real racy. Stage 2 is kind of a street strip deal. In stage 3, your max effort, a lot of times it's just more theater than it is actual power. Doctor's saying HP 70s problems. Yeah, for sure. Tux is saying, hey, Tux just turned 16. Happy birthday, you buddy. Very nice, man. Good deal. You made it. Happy birthday, buddy. Eric's saying, I keep telling myself I should have bought a Hellcat, but I'm already neck deep in my 392. Doctor's saying, yeah, he's that deep into his 5.7, so is Modern Red. Let's see. Cody's talking about his Escape, wants to keep up with V8s, maybe. Sovereign saying, I recently learned that in 2016, Dodge upgraded the needle bearings in the 5.7 engines, bigger bearings. Actually, yeah, it was, they started in mid-production run 2014, the Magneti Morelli's lifters got the bigger needle bearings, and then it just kind of waterfalled after that. Randy's saying 15 grand away from a Hellcat. Exactly. Same with the 5.7, stepping up to a 392. That's exactly why Mother keeps some HP numbers at the level they are up. It is an upsell. And then, which is true. And again, so bring up a good point, the 5.7 always just, it never really works right for a 5.7, right? You can stroke a 5.7. If you're going to boost it, it's cool because, the fact that it's a hemispherical-ish head, it works, the shotgun head style works with the smaller bore size because you are by the angle of the valve and how that valve is in that pentastar type configuration. You are unshrouding it, but you still will have a better unshrouding with a larger bore. But the 5.7 just can't get a fair shake in all of this. And part of the reason for that is the fact that, 5.7 with a stroker, by the time you're said and done, you're more expensive than a 392 in a lot of cases. So, and it's not going to be as fast. But, hang on a second. Modern Red, thank you very much. Saying offer awesome information as always. Great discussion and got me thinking. Very cool, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate the contribution, my friend. Let's see. Also saying things to consider are compression reliability, valve springs are taxed more, etc. Well, you're going to get the right valve springs. You're going to get the right parts to make all these things work. But you're right in that more things are taxed. And these are mechanical parts. Things can break. So just know that coming into it as well. Hallstick, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. All stock, sorry. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Didn't have a question to go with it, but thank you for the contribution, my friend. See Cleaver's in. What's up, man? Junior saying, Eater Professor Mason. Got the bald guy with the shades and the flex. I like it. Tux is asking, did you do anything cool today as well? Yeah, I worked all day. That was pretty cool. But no, thanks. It is cool. I enjoy what I do. Boosted. Oh, here you go. Yeah, these are the numbers we were talking about earlier at 588. Cody saying for the auto trans, the power loss is worse. Actually, HP 70, HP 90s are really good about being efficient. The converter doesn't weigh a ton. And when you go into lockup, there's really not that much inertial loss. Not as much as you would think. Not nearly as much as the old slush box that's going to be in the truck or something along those lines. I found to be actually really, really close. Big Dave saying 426 kit from Pikes 22,000. That kind of gives you guys an idea. Now that's going to be a soup to nuts build, by the way. I mean, you drop your car off, you pick it up. You drop your stock car off, you pick it up with a 426. That's going to be your 22 grand. But yeah, I mean, that's again, that's within the noise of what we were talking about earlier. I mean, what number did we end up coming up with? 16 grand or something like that, just to kind of get the ball rolling. You know, we're talking thousands of dollars. Hey, and by the way, you know, we talked about taking that money and just putting it into a Hellcat. There's one evil little gremlin that's going to get you if you go with a stroker motor. And some of you guys may already know where I'm going with this. It is a lot more difficult to offload a stroker 392 than it is a stock Hellcat. And I want to say this, and I want this to really resonate with you guys that are thinking about going with a stroker motor. When you have something like that, some dealerships won't even take it in on trade. You have to take also into consideration local laws with, you know, who's cool with emissions testing, what areas don't. In some areas that can really be a problem. But the main thing that you need to consider though is that it will be a harder sell. A Hellcat, especially right now, Hellcats hold their value extremely well. It's part of the reason why a lot of guys are going, shit, I don't know if I can afford a Hellcat. Well, I don't know that you can afford to do a stroker kit, because the minute you put that stroker motor together, you can't take the parts off of it and sell them. See, that's one of the things, and we're going to talk about boosted combinations, but one of the things, if you just put a supercharger on a 392, by all accounts, I mean, you could just disassemble the kit and sell the kit and sell the car as a stock car. You're just putting it back to stock, get some of that money back. So you're not money ahead, but in a way you're money ahead. I mean, a full-on blower kit is typically going to run you, say, 15 to 17 grand. We've already established that a stroker kit with some brother-in-law, you know, deal is going to run you somewhere around 16, 19, whatever the number was. But you can at least capture some of that supercharger money, where you cannot do that with the stroker motor. It's in the car, it's a fixture, it's there to stay. So you've got to consider that aspect of a stroker motor. You lose a buying audience. A lot of people don't want to have anything to do with it. Some might, because look, I get it. There's a seat for every ass out there. But are they going to pay the extra money? We're talking a lot of freaking money. I mean, dude, we're talking a GSX-R 750 away from the money, okay? So that's where I'm going with this. Are they going to pay what percentage of that stroker motor to get it? Plus, that car ain't going to be just putting around town. You go through all the hassle, the headache, the emotion, and everything else to put a stroker motor together. That thing is going to have a foot broken off in its ass a lot. So it's going to be worn down pretty good, and not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they're made to spin. That's what engines do. It's a reciprocating contraption. It's going to be doing its job, and it's not going to hurt the thing to run it. That's not the point. I guess the point is people see that and they think race car, because that's kind of what it is. You're buying race parts for this thing. These are not factory OE parts. So again, you've got to consider it from that point of view. Not only are you spending the money, this is money that you cannot then recapture. And again, you know, you take a scat pack. Let's say your scat pack is I don't know. Let's say it's a garden variety scat pack. You can get $30,000 for that car. It's got, you know, decent miles on it, you know, whatever year it is, whatever mileage it is, you can get around 30 grand for it. Well, your 30 grand plus your 16 grand puts you at $46,000, right? You got $46,000 worth of, you know, assuming that, you know, the scat pack is, you've got good equity and whatever in it. But you've got that amount in bargaining power, $46,000. Most Hellcats are trading at around $50,000. It's weird. That's their number. They just, a little bit more, a little bit less, 55, 47, whatever, but they're somewhere in that range, that $50,000 range. So you're going to tell me that for a couple of grand more, you could have a Hellcat, which will absolutely retain all of its resale value. It's a Hellcat, so it's got an HP 90. The Skeeter truck is driving by out there. That's what that is. That Hellcat is going to retain all of its resale value and then some. It's got an HP 90 transmission. It's got Hellcat panache, if nothing else. And you get all of that, plus as a blank slate, that Hellcat will John Holmes a freaking stroker motor car. It's just that bad, guys. And I hate to put it that way, but I can't put it any other way. And you will certainly feel that way after you've spent that kind of money only to get smoked by a stock Hellcat. See how I kind of went full circle with that? Hang on just a second. All stock, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Very much. Appreciate the contribution. Didn't have a... Oh, here we go. All stock saying, so let's talk Tomcat cams and torque converter sizing. All right, so the Tomcat cam, that is a camshaft that's kind of set up for, okay, so now we're talking cams and Hellcats. The only way I will sign off on a cam for a Hellcat is that it's going to have pulley ratio of some kind, 295, 310, something along the lines, because when you start camming a Hellcat, the first thing that happens is you lose boost. When you lose boost with an engine that already has only 9.5 to 1 compression, the issue is that the car starts to feel soft, just in general, throughout the power band. Even though the car may make more power, it just has this overall soft feel. So for me, I want to have the car make more boost than stock, say, 12 or 13 pounds, but do it with a cam. So, you would pulley it with the idea of making 14 pounds to where you're going to end up making 12. And that's, again, it seems counterintuitive. Like, well, yeah, it's going to make more power because it's making more boost. No, actually, you're pulleying the thing to where if it were stock, it'd make like 14 or 15 pounds. In other words, like a 295 upper pulley. But with the cam, it's really going to be making like 12. So a little bit easier to tune, little bit easier as far as, injectors and everything else. It's just better to go with, get more boost out of it and use that more boost more efficiently. You'll be able to make more power, but the discharge temps per boost is going to be lower with that cam. So that's where I am with that camshaft. It was originally put together specifically for a pulleyed Hellcat. As far as what kind of power numbers you can expect to get out of it, I don't ever quote any power numbers with that cam on a Hellcat, because it's all going to depend on the pulley ratio that you end up deciding to go with and the fuel that you end up going with. But for a pump gas application, it'll definitely pick up some power, but you'll pick up quite a bit of theater with it. And the rest is all anecdotal. I mean, you're going to have to get with Dr. Diff on that. He can tell you how that car ran. Apparently, it runs really good. Actually, it probably runs a little bit better than I thought it was going to run. But again, the cam was designed to run with a more aggressive pulley ratio. If you are planning on leaving the pulley ratio stock, in other words, stock upper, stock lower, by the way, the pulley ratios, I actually prefer the stock upper pulley even though it weighs about as much as a freaking 12 pack. I prefer the stock upper pulley with like an Innovators West lower or an ATI 10% lower. I like the Innovators West lower because I don't think you have to shave off any part of the block to get that thing to work. Triple pin the thing and it's going to work out pretty good. But that's just my 2 cents, nothing wrong with the ATI 10%. But that setup is designed with one thing and one thing alone in mind, and that is more boost. Now, the cool thing is that you can throw even more boost at it and make a fuel change over to E85, and that's where things get real interesting. You go 10% lower, 275 up, or E85, and now instead of making, on a Mustang dyno somewhere around 800 horsepower to the rear wheels, now you're making like 830, 840 some odd horsepower to the rear wheels. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's making more power everywhere. So, just something to consider when you're looking at any cam for those engines. Like I say, I always try to kind of err on the side of caution. And for the most part, the guys that are looking to cam a Hellcat at that level just want the theater, man. They want to hear that drum solo coming out of the back of that car. That's really what you're buying with those things. That's a question. It's funny. That's a question I used to get a lot at Pikes. Now, how much will a cam get on a Hellcat? And it's like, I learned pretty quickly. It's like, by itself, not so much, because you do lose boost. And the thing is that, yeah, you lose boost. And you always read, yeah, you lose boost, but you gain horsepower. Notice that you don't gain a lot, though. And what they don't tell you is that, yeah, you lose boost, and you lose that boost response, that pop, that roll into it hit that you get. You lose that, at least a portion of it. And you've got to have the pulley ratio to get that back. And if you don't recapture it, God, a car just feels freaking soft, man. It feels like a big engine with a soft ass cam. I mean, stock cams, like a much smaller than stock cam, would actually feel better at that point. Let's see. But thank you very much for the contribution, brother. Cleaver's checking in saying, yo, B, what's up, man? Oh, here are the numbers here. 511. That's what we were talking about for that corrected number. Cody's asking, wouldn't gearing also play a role? It can, but for purposes of conversation, we're just going to stick with specific numbers here. Crypto saying, hey guys. Arthur saying, B Mason, what up? Like it. Let's see. Oh, Doc saying, boosted a stock 5.7, made 9 to 11 PSI in a torque storm. Put an Enforcer cam in it, made the same-ish power, and it had 6 to 9 PSI, but sounds and runs so much better. Pull it back up and made a number. And so that's one of the things that, when it comes down to it, again, yes, you need to make the same amount of boost. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't like, one of the most annoying conversations and comparisons that I see, it'll go something like this. Well, if you take something that's boosted and you put a cam in it and it makes a little bit more power, but at a lower boost number, then it's safer. Really? No, it's not safer. The car is going to blow up if it's going to blow up. If you're going to keep your foot buried in it at all times, stock ain't safe when you're doing that. So safety, yeah, you want to talk about a relative term. That's a relative term. But I understand where they're coming from, lower discharge temperatures and all of that. It works, but you need to be making the same boost. At least bring it back up to stock boost levels. Don't go from 10 to 11 to 8 or 9 and just make the same power, but on less boost. It's like, well, you can run more timing. Oh, God, no, don't. Just please, just get it back up to stock boost levels, but know that with that pulley ratio, you will absolutely be making more power. Doc Diff saying low 9-ish, like 8.7, but also did much better. Enforcer's a good cam for that. Randy saying 16 grand for a crate Hellcat engine, warranty and all, tough to beat. Hell, 21 grand for a red eye engine. Can you get to 800 horsepower for $21,000? Not a stroker motor. You're not. No, not even. You ain't even in the same sport, much less the same ballpark. So, yeah, that's gonna. It's no. You're not going to get there. And look, my thing is this again. Hellcat engine for 21 grand or 16 grand. That's just like what we were talking about a minute ago. You could get the whole car with your trade-in, and by the way, it'll be a whole lot easier. You want the conversion for Hellcat, trying to use that operating system it's just no. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that are going on there. Can you get to 800 horsepower for 21 grand? Here's the funny thing with a Hellcat. If you just have a Hellcat, getting 800 horsepower to the rear wheels, not to the crank, like with the red eye, getting 800 horsepower to the rear wheels is this is no joke, a couple of pulleys, a cat delete pipe, just because you're going to be running E85. And it's, cleaner anyway. Couple of pulleys, injectors, dual pump setup with, again, E85. It's a freaking mid 9-second car. That's 800 horsepower and change usually to the rear wheels. And it'll do that over and over, 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 over and over and over and over and over again. Just ask Racer X. So that's kind of the twist here, is that it all has this weird pivot number. I keep saying that phrase a lot, pivot number. Lots of corporate stuff going on lately. But it has a number that looks a lot like that $18,000. That number that Pikes had thrown out there at 22 grand. You can see where this is going. You have 20 grand to play with, 16 grand to play with, plus a scat pack. What's the smart money gonna get you? You guys know what's in my garage. So just something to consider. Eric's saying, I know we are all getting into boost conversations next. Would 226, 230 cam do okay with a Pro Charger setup? Yeah, it'd do really well. So 226, 232, but we would have to know all the rest. And this, of course, on a 392, we need to know all the rest of the specs. 226 and 232 on a 114 or a 116 is going to have a tendency to try to push that power way too far out. If you're going 226, 232, the good thing is that you're not going crazy with the exhaust duration. That'll help kind of rein that RPM back a little bit. It'll limit horsepower, but it'll also kind of keep the cam in a cool, like workable street range. If the LSA, the lobe separation, that's the width, I'm not Wu-Tang here, but it's the same kind of thing. It's how much Wu is in the tang here. If it's tighter, it's going to bring that power back even still, and that's going to make for a better street engine overall. The big problem with centrifugal superchargers is that they have a rising boost curve. So, at the hit, you might only be making 3 pounds of boost, 4 pounds if you're really lucky. And then as it revs up, that boost goes more to your peak boost number, which is whatever the number is going to be based on your pulley ratio. There's no wastegate or anything like that. You wouldn't want to try that with a belt-driven supercharger because it's just higher parasitic loss. There's ways to do it, but for practical conversation, you're not going to do that. But the problem with that rising boost curve is that it takes peak torque and it pushes it further and further from where it was stock. And so with a cam with like a 116 lobe separation angle, it's going to want to push power like out at 64, 6600 RPM in stock form, and then you're going to try to drag that out even further. Bad idea. So with any centrifugal supercharger, look at your lobe separation angle. If it is 116, that's too wide for a Pro Charger, in my opinion. It's going to feel soft on its way up there anyway. That's going to need to come back. The tighter the lobe separation angle is, the better it's going to be. So that's just what I like to see. Down to, I wouldn't go any deeper than like a 114, but there are, 113 is okay too. There are some things that will start to make a difference though. But yeah, no, it will. I mean, if it's around that range, it'll work okay. Just know that with a Pro Charger, it may feel a little bit soft. Doc saying on the intake reply, what about doing a Hellcat throttle body like Rick's car? We've seen 1.09, if I remember correctly, gram at wide open throttle at higher RPM. It flows crazy good. I know it's limited to the throat, but we did see gains with the bigger throttle body. You can. Some guys have a problem tuning that larger throttle body, so you can absolutely go that route. But just in my experience, 85 is still going to be really good for what you're going to be working with. And realistically, you should still see numbers that are pretty similar with that 85, I would think anyway. But I could be wrong. It could be that, if there's, that funnel shape, if there's some kind of a, stacking effect or whatever the case is, and there could be some merit to that. I've heard people swear by the Hellcat throttle body on 392s. I've yet to be proven. I've yet to hear that, that somebody testifying to the validity of that. I've yet to ever see that be disproven. I don't think it hurts anything. So if it's working and you can tune it, keep going that route. Doc saying, and because of the shortage on parts, we'll go to my big boy 106 only because the used Hellcat throttle body we got off online site was hanging up, but still seemed to me at least it flowed more than a stock one. Allstock's asking about the Tomcat cam. Does the Tomcat benefit from torque converter or any aftermarket shaft? Didn't get to the torque converter thing. So here's the deal. The stock converter, you'd be surprised. The stock converter will actually flash to 3,000 RPM. What I don't like recommending are torque converters for the HP 70 and HP 90 transmission. I know that some guys have had some success with a Circle D converter that apparently drives around halfway decent and will flash to about 4,500 RPM. But I just don't know. Man, that's another thing. Converters with these type of cars, I just don't like them. They're a little too loose, honestly. I'll tell you what, if you're not used to driving a car with a converter, you'll swear that something's wrong with the car. Just because the car is going to want to, you're going to put your foot in the throttle and the car's just not going to move. You're going to be like, God dang, you're going to keep giving it throttle and throttle and throttle. It's going to go, and it starts going. But if you mat the throttle, it takes off and really trucks. It's fun in short bursts, but these engines and with these cams, they make enough power down low and they have enough response down low to where you don't need a converter. A converter is something that you need if you're drag racing and you are trying to hit the rear tires as hard as you possibly can to get the thing to launch. Well, these engines don't need it. In a Tomcat, in a Hellcat with pulleys, you ain't going to need a converter. Again, I'll reference Exhibit A again with Racer X's car. That car had a stock converter that was hitting 1.3s like clockwork. It's not that, or 140s for sure, like clockwork. On its way to, every pass the car ever made was a 9-second pass. So in short, no. I wouldn't suggest a converter. It's extra expense that I don't feel like you need to incur with that modification. And again, Modern Red, thank you very much. All stock, thanks again. KDC saying, hey Mason, I took your advice with the Joker cam and supporting mods with the exception of a 3500 stall, Circle D on a 5.7 Nag 1. Shall I be fine with street manners? Yep, I think you'll be good. Hey, Doc Diff can answer that before I can. I know he had one of the Jokers in one of the trucks, but I can't remember. I thought that one might have had a converter in it. 3500 is going to be a little bit racy, but on a tire at the drag strip, it would be a riot. So get ready because it's about to be a new experience for you. All stock saying up above. I think I hit the questions. I hope I did. HU37 saying, if you're going to boost a 5.7 or a 6.4, I can see buying a stroker kit. If you're going to forge the internals, to buy a stroker kit and keep it in A, it's not worth it. So let's talk about this for a minute. Boosting your stroker motor. I haven't talked about that yet, have we? I hate getting into this because what ends up happening is you want to talk about having to pulley up a blower. Your ProCharger D1X is going to need, you're going to need to step that thing down about 1/2 inch as far as drive pull, your blower pulley, to get that thing to actually be able to feed a 426. Fueling becomes a lot more important, and you are going to have to feed now significantly more cubic inches. And the compressor may or may not be able to keep up with it. A D1X should be able to make it there, but I know a lot of the guys that run centrifugal superchargers with strokers typically just go to the F1. And you can always pull, put a much larger pulley on an F1, but you're going to want, the thing is with that, you're going to want to do the standalone pulley setup, which is mo money. You're going to have an F1, which is a little bit more expensive, but yeah, you're going to need to pulley that thing up for sure to be able to feed the 426. Positive displacement superchargers are something else when it comes to that, because positive displacement have a higher parasitic loss from the inertia of having to turn these two large rotors that are in there. And when you pulley them up to make more boost, that's really not a problem because you're kind of already making the power with the boost down low. You're able to overcome that inertia just with the extra power that you're making. But when it comes to stroker motors and you dump all the boost with a cam and then you dump even more boost with the displacement, now you've got to pulley this thing up like crazy to get it to feed the thing at low RPM, high RPM, and everywhere in between. And you're just oh God, it's just annoying with the blowers that are out today. Stock blower, doesn't matter. Maggies, you can get there with a Maggie. They're a little bit easier. Whipple is where I'm getting all of my bad looking faces from, because I just ran into a lot of weird issues with Whipple superchargers, with strokers. I know a lot of people have had good luck with them. You've got to be building a race car to, in my opinion, to really get to the point where that's going to be worth it. Maggie, on the other hand, looks like that works a little bit better. And throttle bodies are a lot happier with Maggies, and just from what I've seen, it's a better overall combination. So, in saying that, if you're going to go that route and you want to boost a street-driven stroker motor, you're kind of screwed in a way, because you're going to be spinning the hell out of this whatever blower that you're putting on the car, but you're not really going to be able to take advantage of spinning the hell out of the blower that you've got. And, well, you will, if you go E85. And a lot of guys don't like hearing that, but the reality is that once you get to that level and you want to make lots of power, pump gas ain't your friend anymore. I mean, you done gone and kicked pump gas out, period. You're going to want to go to E85 at that point. And of course, that adds even more complexity in fuel systems and everything else. But you're going to be in the range now of 900 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, and that's big boy power. That is scary amount of power. That's like the cars that I didn't like driving. Were some of the ones that were in that 900, 950 range. They were fun to drive, but gathering data on them was a pain in the ass because you've got to be on a tire just to roll into the throttle and collect your data log going down the street. So, yeah, it's annoying. Hazing the tires at 125 miles an hour gives you bad data, okay? Believe me, and that's like, it gets annoying. So anyway, yeah, I know, but you get the idea. It's when you get to that level, you are now in the range of like absolute lunacy when it comes to making power. We're talking tires don't really act right at those speeds. And when you start to haze the tires, these are some of the ramifications of what you're asking. You roll into the throttle and it does everything A-OK, right? And then you watt the throttle, downshifts, or you manually shift it, hit the throttle, and it's hazing the tires, and you shift, and it's still hazing the tires, and the car is basically going straight, but you're literally hazing the tires at over 125 miles an hour. Like anything weird, like you don't move the steering wheel. It's like you're making very slight corrections. I don't recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart. I'll just put it to you that way. Racer X's car would actually do that. It didn't make near that power. BB78, thank you very much. Saying C cam question above. Let's see. Hey B, enjoying the live stream. What do you think of these cam specs for my 2010 6.1 Hemi? Intake rocker ratio 165, which is stock. Intake and exhaust lobe separation on a 112. 112 is pretty good for that combination. I like 112s with that intake. What he's talking about, intake, the lobe separation angle is that how wide they are. The tighter they are, the more mid-range, typically the more power that they'll make, but it will and it'll make more torque down low. It'll sacrifice a little bit of power up top to make more torque down low and mid-range, with the only drawback being it's going to have more of a cam sound, which if you like it, cool. If you don't, well, then it's pick something else. But good combination so far. Let's see. Intake valve center line at 112. I would rather see that. So you're installing it. What that means is he's installing it straight up. If your intake valve center line is, in this case, what I would suggest would be to install it 3 degrees advanced, which would be to install it at 109. 109 or even 108, go 3 to 4 degrees advanced. And that would be a 112 on a +3 or on a +4, aka a intake lobe, intake center line at 112, installed at 109 or 108. 218 on the intake, 226 on the exhaust at 50 for the duration. Good little cam. I like it. It's very similar to a Comp 268, but with a very tight lobe separation angle. It's actually really similar to the Contender cam that Doc Differential sells. That's a VVT cam, not one of these types of cams that don't use VVT. So that will be a fun cam for you, though. It'll make peak power at about 6,000-ish RPM, 6,200 RPM. And it's going to have a real good tip-in throttle response. It's going to have really good mid-range, and it's going to sound pretty freaking good. So I think you're going to like that. Would I make any changes might be the next question. Well, I would probably like to see a little bit more intake duration because you're not that far away from stock at 218. I would prefer to see something around 220. I know it's starting to nitpick, but 220, 222 on the intake side. 226 is good on the exhaust side. I'd maybe kick that up to like 228. But I mean, we're talking nitpicky stuff here. I think you'll really like that cam. It'll sound good and it'll be crisp. With the tighter duration is going to make that cam a lot crisper, and it's going to be better to drive underfoot. So general street manners and how the car is going to act just playing around with it, it'll feel good. In fact, if you were to let somebody else drive your car with one cam versus the other, they would say that 218 probably feels better to drive. BB saying, I hope that's enough info. I didn't have all that info last time I asked you. Will I lose some torque down low and have a higher red line? No, you won't lose any torque down low. Not with a cam like that. It'll sound good. You may have a little bit of like low speed, partial, like very light throttle loss, but I don't think you'd really notice it that much. Everything else is going to feel good. And again, with a 218 with a tight LSA at 112, it is going to feel crisp. But again, you're at 112, and I would really prefer to see that thing advanced at least 2 to 3 degrees at minimum. I'm not a big fan of 218. Well, I say that though. Shorter duration, 112, I'd still want to see it installed at least on a 110. I mean, it'd be a couple of degrees, but again, it's nitpicking. And with it being at a 112 with a 112 degree lobe separation angle, at least it'll help push the power out a little bit. So I can sign off on that, but it's not exactly what I would do, but it's not a bad cam. Don't sweat it, brother. You're in good shape. But if I were to make a change, if I were to give a suggestion, I would say install it at 109 and open it up just a little bit with the duration. The extra duration will make it act like it'll technically be opening sooner. So it'll kind of cheat it to almost like a 108. Which is going to give you a little bit more power down low. But because you're still in a real, the 218 range is still kind of small. So, which is good. You don't want, bigger is not better when it comes to the Hemi stuff, believe me. Let's see. All stock. Make sure I get this question. So your thoughts on upgrading the stall converter with a cam like Circle D or Pro Torque? The Demon Red Eye converters are on back order. Again, man, I just don't know that you're going to see a ton of benefit there. Not for the setup that you're looking at. I mean, you could go with a Circle D or a Pro Torque. I would say don't get real aggressive with it. And again, I'm not a huge torque converter fan with that transmission. I know of guys that have tried it, and I know the truck guys love them, but I think there's something to do with the trucks. They're not making as much power, and I don't know. I haven't seen converters really pan out too well for the cars. I'll just leave it at that. Nag 1 stuff. The Nag 1 cars that I've driven with converters really weren't awesome to drive. I mean, you had to know what you were getting yourself into when you're driving a car with one of those types of converters. Again, I would caution against high stall torque converters. If for no other reason than they just generate a lot of heat. They can generate a lot of heat. So, and I know that with ours, we would typically kill the torque converter clutch in the first couple of gears at least. And then bring the TCC lock back in like third gear and for sure in fourth gear. It just depended on the car and how it was running. Let's see. Where am I? What happened here? I lost my spot. Let's see. Oh, Richard's saying he's got a 2019 Scat Pack and talking about going to a 428 stroker with a Pro Charger. Looking forward to your next cam design. I agree with your Hellcat idea, but I plan on keeping my car forever. That's okay, man. Listen, if you plan on keeping the car for till the end of time, that's your baby, man. Do your baby stuff with it. The main thing is to have a clear understanding of what your goal is. What is the end goal? What is the final analysis? Where do you want this thing to be? See, here's the thing. A lot of times guys will start getting worked up about doing stroker setups, and they're doing it for the sake of doing something to their car, just staying generically involved with the thing. And my approach is a lot different. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a goal, first of all, and then you put a plan together to get to the goal. How are you going to get to the goal with what you got versus are there alternative options for you to reach that particular goal? And when it comes to the amount of money that's being spent, it's not a small amount, and you've got to take a look at all angles, be able to see this from all different sides, front, back, side to side, top and bottom. If it makes sense, it makes sense. And just know what you're getting into when you're getting into these things. And, a lot of a lot of this advice that I'm giving, it's not just because I've been there before, but I've had these conversations with customers. And it usually, it's funny because I've talked more people out of spending a lot of money than I ever have collecting a lot of money, it seems like. But the reason for that is, what's the goal? Well, I want it to be faster. Okay, well, that's easy. Put a stickier tire on it. Well, no, that's not what I mean. I want more power. Well, what does more power mean? You want more power, only drive it during the winter time. I know it sounds silly, but again, it's more of a thought experiment than anything else. Stroker motor is a lot of money. It's the least efficient way to get X amount of power out of the car. But the one thing that the stroker motor has, there's a certain cool factor to it. And regardless of what you say about and how you feel about peak power and making all the power versus supercharging and all this other stuff, being able to, reclaim money and whatever else through selling of parts, there's a certain amount of theater that the stroker motor, you kind of get with that you're not going to get with a blower. And there's a certain, an NA stroker motor, there's something just kind of inherently kind of cool about that. So there's that to consider as well. But from an outright power standpoint, until you start getting into the fuel system, E85, which is practically a must because you ain't going to make the right amount of power with race gas with that setup. Boosted and everything else, F1X, standalone pulley system, all the fuel pumps, all the injectors. And again, E85 works great with 10+1 compression ratios. They make a ton of power. And I've seen them regularly make, 392s, with forged internals, I've seen those make over 800 to the rear wheels. But it's not that a 426 makes more than that. It's just that it will make that amount of power and it'll just do it with more torque. HU37 saying most people make the mistake of not thinking about what selling the car at some point when the car is modded. Car dealers don't want them, and many potential buyers don't trust the seller. Very true. ET Racing's checking and saying, "Hey, Brian, got the arm flexes. I like it." ET saying, "I'm not up to speed on your rides. What rims are those on your 5-liter?" Well, if you're talking about this 5-liter, those are just the stock Rally Sport. Actually, those are the upgraded Rally Sport wheels from the factory. The rims on Foxy are the 6-spoke Cobra R style wheels from the 93 Cobra R. So I'm going to say nothing beats the sound of a rip-roaring visceral V8. One thing I will say about the NA combinations is that real sharp throttle response. That's something that, if they're set up right, if you're not looking for just making all the powers in the world, but just that whap, high if you build a high compression stroker like 12-to-1, where you're really kind of stuck and you can't even get 91 octane to make that combination work. But there are some combinations that I know of that would rip, but again, not really streetable. If the other issue with stroker motors is that there's a tendency to want to go more and more and more with compression ratio. I'm bad about that. Like I'm the guy that wants all the compression ratios. Because for every atmosphere, you get another 3%, and it just keeps stacking on top of itself. But one of the things that you got to be careful with is getting yourself in a situation where you compression ratio yourself into a spot where you've got to hemorrhage timing to keep the thing working on pump 93 octane gasoline. Just again, one other thing you got to consider. Allstock, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. BB saying, oh yeah, I got BB's in there too. Saying appreciate the feedback as usual. There we go. Hopefully I answered the question. Let's see. Got a lot of comments here. Oh, ET saying, oh, wait, that's a Camaro. Sorry. Yeah, it's a Camaro. Sovereign saying 800 to the wheels. Eek. Yeah, believe me, there is a little bit of eek on that. Actually, the funny thing, at that weight, 800 horsepower to the rear wheels is just the other side of manageable, although you can make it work. But yeah, lots of eek. Lights saying, I was looking at 1970 Challenger and it looks more aerodynamic and sleek than the current Challenger body style. It's just smaller. It is really all it is. You could fit a Challenger into a modern Challenger. It's kind of funny. Oh yeah, Sovereign saying it most likely is the E-body is much smaller. There's I don't know if it's induced drag or parasitic drag different, what the difference would be. In other words, induced meaning in this case, it would just be with the wing and other things like that. But just in general, the actual, what is the profile? If you were to, etch this thing out for, it represents a flat plate of X number of square inches. I have no idea what the difference would be between the two. With, like the wide body with the flares and everything else. I guess that would still be parasitic drag. But anyway, Sovereign saying, yeah, the new stuff has to deal with modern safety. It's true. Mike saying, sort of unrelated to the topic, but just wanted to say vibrant mid mufflers are absolutely an alternative to race bullets. They sound amazing. I've heard them and they do sound good. I knew guys that ran those on the SC400s and SC300s, the Lexuses. Sovereign's hanging out with light. Let's see. Randy's, I'm wooing in the tang here. Absolutely. If y'all missed that, you knew getting into the chat. That was from earlier. All three of them were thick. Yep. Randy's saying, been there myself. All stock. Yeah, we talked about the converter. Sovereign saying something about that 392. I like it. I love the 392s. Sovereign saying no, say no to CVT transmission. Racer X is the man. Yeah, he is. Known it for a long time. Let's see. We touched on everything for BB. Again, thank you very much. H237 saying he's got a Circle D converter in his car. It drives well because the lockup feature is great. The torque converter doesn't lock up in first gear, locks up in all others. Hard launches with drivability. Very nice. Appreciate the feedback, man. And I know that, listen, the converters have come a long way, even since I've messed with any of that stuff. So I hope that, there are newer converters that will work and play nice. But my thing is, with the cams that I typically put together, a converter is really more, you don't need it, but it will enhance. And that's really where I'm hoping with where some of these converters are now. Checked in with BB78 again. Thank you for the contribution, my friend. Let's see. Cal is saying, my goal is to get a 1320 into the 10s while keeping it naturally aspirated. Don't really need anything more than that, at least for now anyways. Yeah. So you can definitely do that. That's not a problem. I mean, it's going to be a cammed car. You don't even have to get, it's just, with enough weight reduction, you might be able to get it even without a cam though. But a cam would make that pretty much a done deal in really good air. Just 50 saying a 426 will make more power with less boost. Yeah, it will. Cam for cam, it certainly will. Hellcat meth inject for intake temps. Negative Ghost Rider. Run, don't walk away from meth injection. I do not like it at all. Makes a mess. One of the things that I used to see, oh man. So it doesn't really lower temperatures the way that you would think. The right way to do it would be to fog the bottom part of the blower. But you can't really do that. So what guys do is they fog the throttle body. They'll fog it like you're fogging a dry shot of nitrous. And by the time the meth goes through the throttle body and hits in with the rotors, which you've got, it's basically a nucleation site waiting. It's just nothing but nucleation sites, right? So it goes into the supercharger, hits the rotors spin it, it discharges into the manifold, and then you start having distribution, like is it really distributing the product, in this case, the meth injection? Is it getting to all the cylinders? I don't know that it is. And I would prefer to have some, the way that methanol injection was originally designed was to be a in the port injection. It goes way back to pre-World War II aircraft engines, when you're dealing with a situation where you need charge cooling and you need octane. Poor quality fuel. The fuel just wasn't all that great back then. And so to get around that, you had water meth injection, and it was a basically a spray bar in the middle of the port. And when you hit the button, basically it hit it with water meth injection for whenever you needed emergency power. It was never really designed, and it doesn't work that well in the application that we're talking about right now, because it's a fluid that's traveling through contraptions that are really designed to handle air, and really air alone. You always see the superchargers sitting on top of the carburetor and all of that. That's great. But even then, how good is that distribution? I don't know. Usually it's presumed to be fairly decent, but when it comes to meth injection, man, I mean, it'll get there eventually. I just don't trust the distribution, and I don't like using it as a tuning tool. Like some guys will try to take meth injection and they go, oh, well, it runs richer when you run meth, so I can run more timing. Oh, God. No, it doesn't work like that. So it makes whatever timing you have a little bit safer, I guess, at least from detonation. But the other side of it is guys go, well, if a little bit is good, then a lot must be better. And it's not. Throwing more meth at it doesn't make it better. And hitting it with a real hard shot down low is a real bad idea. It's a good way to hydrolock your engine. And if nothing else, wash out your cylinders. So there's that to consider. Let's see. Allstock saying, thanks for dropping your knowledge, Master of Mopar. Thanks for hanging out with me, brother. Appreciate it. Liker saying, type 1, if B Mason is cool. Liker say 1. I like it. Callus and I saying, random question. What do you like better, a 70 or 71 Challenger? The 71. Either way, I like them. Believe it or not, I kind of like the frowny face Challengers. Those are the 72 through 74, even though they never got a Hemi. And if the next question is, would I prefer a CUDA or a Challenger? I always liked the Challenger a little bit better than the CUDA. I don't know why. I guess to me, I'll tell you something. So I'm more of a Mercury Cougar guy than I am a Mustang guy. Like a 68 GT or 68 Fastback is a really cool car. I also like the Cougars. Okay, so for me, the CUDA, it was always a little bit smaller. Cute car and everything, but I was always more attracted to the Challenger. I cannot give you an answer as to why though. Sovereign saying he likes the 70. Someone saying 70 RT 440 Magnum Alpine White Kowalski style. Absolutely. Awesome car. Also Vanishing Point, where they destroyed one, but it was a scrap heap though before they made it film worthy. But yeah, that would be a great way to go. 70, either way, 70, 71, can't go wrong. Well, guys, listen, we are coming up on 2 hours on a Tuesday. So I got to check out because I got to wake up crazy early. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out. Love each and every one of y'all. Could not do this without y'all. Stay safe out there, guys. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep her shiny side up. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We will catch y'all on the next one. That is a wrap. Adios.